Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. Today we're going to be looking at the Porygon-Z version of Whimsicott. It's an archetype that I've been exploring recently. Obviously you've already seen the Welder one on the channel, so let's talk about why the Porygon-Z build is also a viable option. And the basic concept really is that Porygon-Z stays around a lot more often in this format because there's less easy gusting. And let's face it, Porygon-Z's ability is incredible. It allows us to reach very high numbers with this archetype, much higher than the Welder version. I think the way to look at the two in comparison is the Welder build has better gusting options and is slightly more consistent and less reliant on Toy Box. Whereas this deck is like, you Toy Box, you get everything going, and then it starts becoming a powerhouse. That's kind of how it plays out in this current format. If it doesn't get going, then obviously you're going to have some slower turns and whatnot, but hopefully, with the help of both Mysterious Guidance and Toy Box GX, you should be able to get these pieces going and really take advantage of this ability, even more so than ever in the new format, thanks to the Recycle Energy that we get from the new Unified Minds set, which is essentially infinite damage buff as well for you, which is awesome. As soon as you find that card, you can slap it on for free with Porygon in play, and that's just 30 damage right there. And when your Whimsicott gets knocked out, you get that 30 damage back into your hand straight away. So once you accumulate all of your Recycle Energies, in theory, you have an infinite 120 damage that you can just throw back down onto the field whenever a Whimsicott goes down. So we always are threatening good damage. That's the whole idea of this build, and it's what makes this much more dangerous. For example, if you've just received a knockout, you can just go ahead, get those 4 Recycle Energies back, and like Diantha back a triple acceleration and like a fairy energy. You can attach all of those in one turn, and you know that's going to blow out whatever's in the active. So the whole idea is you have some big like swing comeback potential with this build, which previous Whimsicott builds didn't really have. It's normally that you end up going for like a Welder attach and hit them back for like 100 or something like that. Whereas this build is much more like bounce back potential, which is really cool with the deck. Let's jump into the Pokemon then, and as mentioned, we are playing the 4-3 Whimsicott. We have the 4 new Cottonees because they can draw us a card. Obviously, when you have Recycle Energies as well, there's no reason not to attach a Colourless on turn 1 because you can get it back if Cottonee's knocked out. So you may as well just slap it on the active and just do a Dust Gathering to end your turn. You can do the same thing with the Porygon. There's actually 2 Porygons that are currently in format that we could go for. It's either this one that can, again, draw you a card, or this one that has 10 less hit points, and you can flip coins to try and find special energy cards from your deck. That one's very tempting, but the 50 hit points does put me off. Mainly because there's things like Distortion Door and Spell Tag roaming around, that 50 hit points is way worse than 60 in this format. So I'm staying safe and playing the 60 hit point one, but you can go for the 50 if you really want to. It has a better upside if you flip coins and get Rescue Energies out of the deck, basically. But a way bigger downside if you're up against Spell Tag shenanigans, because you do not want your Porygons to get sniped early on. Then there's Porygon-Z. Crazy Code has a phenomenal ability, of course. As often as we like, we can attach special energy from our hand to one of your Pokemon. So we're going to try and essentially Toy Box to find the Porygon-Z pieces and as many special energy pieces as we can. Usually we go for a majority of Recycle Energies and sometimes like 1 triple acceleration, something like that. Or try and grab ourselves something like an Erika for next turn, where we can just Crazy Code our hand down low and Erika into like a better hand size to try and look for more special energies. That's basically how it goes. So Porygon-Z really is an important card in here. So his ability is what makes this deck tick. Then we have a 2-2 line of Alolan Ninetales. Unfortunately, we lose Beacon Vulpix, but at least this one does have a small benefit in its ability, Secret Alleyway. If we have a Cottonee in play, we can then free retreat out of our Alolan Vulpix, so it's not really the worst starter we could be having, which is pretty good. And Alolan Ninetales with that Mysterious Guidance obviously can help us get things like rare candies and Pokecoms, which is a pretty big deal when we're trying to work towards Porygon-Z. Also, we have a couple other like one-ofs, like some of our tool cards, as well as Reset Stamp as well that we can try and fish out. So Alolan Ninetales definitely is an important card for this sort of combo-orientated deck. It does also come with a couple of attacks, which of course we can use. Snowy Wind does 70 and 30 to one of the opponent's bench. This could be good against some specific non-GX stuff. And Sublimation GX can knock out an Ultra Beast if it's in the active. But usually you'll be using Toy Box, so that's very rare. Plus we already have the Fairy Charm Ultra Beast if we're in those sorts of matchups, so I don't think they're too much of an issue, but something to bear in mind. We also have 1 copy of Ditto Prism. It can be a Vulpix or a Cottonee, which is nice. It can be, like, it can't really be a Porygon because you can't candy Ditto. And we are playing one copy of Dedenne GX. Dedenne Change is still a fantastic ability that we can take advantage of to get into a big hand size, and that's what we're going to go for, because we are already playing a pretty high count of Pokecons and Cherish Balls. It can help us dig turn 1 if we don't find ourselves something like an Elm. We are playing Elm's Lecture in this build, because it's really important for us to get a Porygon down, and things like Cottonee, Ditto, and stuff like that are always great things to dig out. Usually on your opening Elm, you'll go for something like Porygon, Cottonee, Ditto, something like that, depending on what you've started with. So Dedenne gives you the option of drawing 6 more cards to try and dig towards that Elm, because it is vital in this build to use Elm on 1. For trainers, we have some interesting counts going on. The 1 copy of Reset Stamp, bear in mind we are a fairy deck. We use Diantha, so we do have the potential reuse of Reset Stamp if we really want to. Also, we have Alolan Ninetales to help us dig it out at the right times. 1 copy of PokeGear seems very out of place and strange, but we are playing Alolan Ninetales that we can try and grab this PokeGear to get us an option for a supporter card, which I think is actually pretty important. And also, just in general, it's like a 5th Elm or a 5th Cynthia if you're being optimistic. So that's why we're going to play the 1 copy of PokeGear. Honestly, I have like cut down into this count. I wanted it at like 3 or 4. But the space is like super tight with this deck, so we've had to settle for the 1. I still will campaign for keeping 1 because of its use with Alolan Ninetales if you are otherwise supporterless. So I think it's worth being in the deck, maybe even more copies if you find the room, because it is definitely a helpful card. Because, as I said, trying to Elm on 1 and trying to find yourself draw support from Toy Box or whatever can be pretty important. So yeah, the PokeGear is a nice card. I'd like more, but we can only fit 1. So it's an ace-spec card, really. 2 copies of Rare Candy may seem very low, but once again, we have Mysterious Guidance and we have Toy Box, so we will pick it out when we need it. 3 copies of Cherish Ball can be those opening Dedennes if we really need to, as well as, of course, getting Ninetales and Whimsicott, 2 obviously great cards in the deck. 4 Pokecon, turning those 60 hit point things into stage 2s or stage 1s can be a pretty big deal, and again, it's more outs for things like Dedenne, which is nice. We're playing the Ability Fairy Charm, the Ultra Beast Fairy Charm, and the Lightning Fairy Charm. All of them put in a good amount of work here. Ability Charm is good against Mew and Mewtwo. Obviously, you don't want them to sit there and just use Altaria against you the entire game, because we would only be able to use things like Porygon-Z to do 120 to it, and then we confuse ourselves as well. So we'd have to like keep retreating out of our own Porygon and whatnot, which sounds horrible. So having this Fairy Charm means that Mew and Mewtwo can't just sit there Altariaing you the whole time. Well, if they do, it's a stalemate, right? We're both doing no damage to one another, and we can like build up our hand and whatnot. Fairy Charm for Ultra Beasts is obviously very good against Blacephalon, good against Ultra Necrozma, good against Beast Box. It's good against a whole bunch of different things. And the Fairy Charm Lightning is for Pikarom, and basically Pikarom alone, but that's a big enough reason to play the card. It's a great tech include. Pikarom can play Lysander Labs, but it sometimes we'll just play things like Thunder Mountain and Viridian, and if that's the case, you're really going to have a good time against those. 2 copies of Viridian Forest of our own. It's such a strange thing to think about having basically all special energy deck, but then having Viridians, but I really can't think of a better counter stadium for us, because we need to have counter stadiums for Power Plant, basically. So you have to be playing some element of stadiums. I originally had Wondrous Labyrinth in here, but it doesn't actually help like your core strategy a lot of the time. Whereas Viridian Forest gives us better outs towards getting Fairy Energy, and that's a really important deal because it gets us into Toy Box. So Viridian Forest essentially giving us 2 additional outs into Toy Boxing is the reason why we have this stadium in here. It's only 2 copies, so you can like lose a stadium war, but once again we have Diantha as well to try and like reuse these if we really want to. So I think 2 copies is fine. I could see going up to a 3rd stadium because we are once again we are petrified of Power Plant. It's a really scary stadium for this deck. So having counter stadiums is really important. Right now, Viridian seems to be the most helpful one in my book. Also, it helps us get rid of things like excess Elms and whatnot. I should have mentioned that as well for like stamp proofing. Onto the supporters, a couple Dianthas. I really like Diantha. It's a very strong card. When we have such terrible like recovery in the format, Diantha is like such a cool card to use. It can get back important charms if your opponent has somehow got through it with like some backup attacker or whatnot. You can then like Diantha back the charm, put it on your next Whimsicott, and then like break through their attacker that just got through your first charm, which can be really nice. It can also get back things like triple acceleration energy for big damage output. It can get back like Whimsicotts or like rare candies if things have been like gusted and knocked out or whatever. So Diantha is very, very cool. To Erika's Hospitality, it's great for digging. Once you've got your Porygon-Z online, all you want to do is dig towards your recycle energies and your triple accelerations, so we can just continue to swing. So Erika helps us dig deeper into the deck. For Professor Elm's Lecture, like I said, it's just vital to try and get your Cottonees and Porygon down, even getting that Ditto down, so we can potentially Mysterious Guidance is, again, just a really huge deal. So the Elm is a really awesome card to have in this deck, and when you have Toy Box to fall back on, and Mysterious Guidance to fall back on, you feel pretty content to Elm on turn 1, even though it can otherwise be like quite slow for a lot of other decks, where you'd rather Lily and draw more cards. Your hand is oftentimes going to be having one of these pieces that can get you back into a good hand size for the following turn, be it, you know, an Erika's or a Cynthia's, or just one of those stage 1s that can get you into the rest of your stuff. So Elm's really important for this deck. And 4 copies of Cynthia, still great shuffle draw. You can try and insta-play all your energy cards as soon as your Porygon comes into play. That helps thin the deck quite a bit, so then your Cynthias are being a lot more powerful, so that's really important. And on to the energy. We are playing 4 copies of that Recycle Energy. It's obviously a great card for Porygon-Z. 4 copies of 3 CE as well, because it's 90 damage, and you really want that in Whimsicott. This is the main way that we can break through Tag Team GXs, which is obviously a big deal. And then we have 2 copies of Unit Energy. I'm still playing units, not just pure Fair Energy, because of course you can just slap these down whenever you want to. But we are also playing 3 copies of Basic Fairy, so that we have a total of 7 outs to Fairy Energy. That's the 5 outs that you can see as physical energy cards, and then the 2 copies of Viridian. I think that should be plenty for us to get Toy Boxing on turn 2. So I think that's where I'm pretty much sat at the moment. Also, it means we don't instantly lose to a Honchkrow because we have at least something that can attack them, which is pretty nice. And when you have like resistance to the Honchkrow, you can actually break through it, which is quite funny. Honchkrow is not really a thing, but just something to bear in mind, I guess. So yeah, these 3 Fair Energies, I think, are pulling their weight right now. They really increase your outs to Toy Box, and that's really like the crutch of this deck. You need to Toy Box pretty much every game to get your Porygon rolling, unless you got super lucky. So yeah, it feels like worth playing some basic energy cards. Obviously low counts of them, because you have to spend your manual attachment for turn on them, whereas all your other energies, they can just float onto the board like whenever you want to, as long as you're announcing crazy code as you do so. So these 3 Fair Energies, you don't really want to have a much higher count, but they're still pretty useful for getting that Viridian synergy on the go. So here's the full list. I'll try and have it in the section down below as well. So yeah, pause now, or take a look at the description if you want to check out this deck and build it yourselves. Onto tech options. I have ummed and ahed about a few different cards. Energy Lotto could be an interesting like one-of. I remember Gardevoir Swampert used to play this just because it was one of those options that you could have via Ninetales to Mysterious Guidance into it. And at the end of the day, once Porygon's online, all you want to do is find your energy cards, and Lotto can be a good way of doing that. So I could definitely see adding in like 1 copy of this to try and get it going. But once again, we Toy Box so often that we're already digging out a good amount of special energy just via that attack alone. So I don't think it's like mandatory. I've thought about custom catchers a lot. I've thought about playing 2 copies, and I've thought about playing 3 copies, because you don't really have space for 4 ever in this deck. But when you have Diantha and Mysterious Guidance, it's not actually that dumb to just play only 2 or 3 copies. Obviously, playing 2 copies has the big headache of like prizing one, and then it really is useless. If you play 3 copies, though, you can get away with like 1 Gust a game, and then have the option to Diantha at any time and get like another Gust back. So, like, I think 3 Custom Catcher isn't actually the worst, and at the moment I'm just like so against not playing Gust that I really want to try and work in spaces. Right now, though, like, we're multiple stage 1s and a stage 2 in the deck. Although the stage 1s help you get the stage 2s out, whatever, it really does take up a lot of space, and I'm not seeing where we find room for customs, so hit me up if you can find those slots. Wondrous Labyrinth Prism Star, I've already mentioned that I prefer Viridian, just because Wondrous Labyrinth doesn't, like, help you win games, it helps you, like, not lose games, which is a really weird way of, like, thinking about it, but I prefer to have the deck win as much as it can, like, on its own end, rather than hope that your opponent doesn't have like a bounce of a stadium card, where in this format so many decks are playing like 3-4 stadiums that you can just find Wondrous Labyrinth at all the wrong times, and it's just a useless card compared to a Viridian, which can get you into more energy cards for damage, as well as for toy boxing, and just in general, you can start thinning things like Elm so you don't get wrecked by opposing reset stamps. And Tantalize is another option. Obviously, we can pay retreat with recycle energies and then like crazy code them straight back into play. So retreating isn't a difficulty, but we are really annoyed by status conditions. Things like Raichu. Even if they're doing no damage to you with that Fairy Charm, they can like get into like a nice paralysis lock, especially if they're playing 2 copies. It could actually be super annoying for us. So adding in like 1 or 2 copies of Tantalizer might be reasonable. They may have to come in for like one of the Erikas and one of the Cynthias, something like that, which is a little bit awkward because obviously it doesn't give you as good of a draw, but it can help you out against status conditions, which are otherwise very annoying for this deck. The other option, of course, is playing like 1 copy of Switch and just knowing that you can Ninetales into it when you need to, but I'm kind of opposed to that as well. It feels like kind of niche to play low counts of these. That's why I'm not doing it, but if you are worried about some status conditions, you can try and add in the likes of Tantalizer and Switch. Onto the matchup overview. I think Reshizard is our hardest matchup. This is me basically saying that essentially I think the like Dedenne Jirachi build is best as a Mewtwo build. That's pretty much what I think now. I don't think straight Reshizard is all that good. So basically whenever I talk about Reshizard, I'm basically saying it's the power plant green Zard, basically. Because otherwise you should probably be playing the Mewtwo Zard. So I think Reshizard, thanks to those power plants, are definitely bad matchups because they have easy one-hit KO potential. We don't have any charms that can wall them out, and obviously they can stadium their way through us, guaranteed. Shedinja, obviously a very hard matchup. We don't really have any way of stopping their loop, and we're not really an early pressure deck, so they're going to have time to set up against us. And Quad Keldeo is also very bad for us. They can't one-shot the Porygon-Zs, at least, so we can try and hit them a couple times with those. But overall, that's still going to be pretty bad for us, because we confuse ourselves with Porygon, so we can't really chain our own attacks. We'd have to like get 2 set up and then like retreat into one another and whatnot, and that seems really awkward. You'd then have to like sacrifice a Cottonee just to get Diantha to get back like more rare candies and Porygon-Zs, which sounds pretty terrible. The good news is you always have recycle energy and you have 3 Cs, so you can chain attacks with Porygon pretty easily. But I still think with all the healing that Quad Keldeo has, they'll probably just get over the line before you can really do enough. So yeah, it feels like a very bad matchup in theory. So here are my closing thoughts. I'm still a big fan on paper of these Fairy Charms and Fluffy Cotton. They're like 2 really annoying things. Like the ability is very strong on Whimsicott. The charms can just be like shake my hand territory if they don't have the right answers to it, which is just a really cool thing to have going into Worlds. You can just be like, oh, I've auto-won because I added 1 card into my deck, which is a pretty weird thing to have, and some decks really do still have to be careful of this card. Or these cards, the fairy decks, because they really are quite scary at times. I'm a little bit concerned about the lack of Gust, and once again I've sat here for a good like half hour trying to figure out how I can somehow fit customs into the deck, even if it's just 2 copies, but I find it very difficult. And also, you do have to still admit that this deck does not want to see Power Plant. I do think Reshizard Greens is a big threat for Worlds. I think it's genuinely got a lot of viability. I'm a big fan of very high Power Plant in that deck as well. It helps you out a lot against this deck, helps you out a lot against Pikarom, helps you out a lot against Mewtwo. So it's a no-brainer that Power Plant will be in a high count of Reshizard players' decks, and that's really bad for Whimsicott. So it's a pretty awkward loss to take going into day 1, I would say. And at the same time, this deck is reliant on flips. Oftentimes you will toy box, and especially that toy box turn, the turn that happens, you really need to flip heads to not get damaged. So that's a really important deal for you. So these flips are definitely important on some crucial turns. Once you get over that hurdle, you can definitely do okay. And of course, bear in mind, if you get if you toy box and then your opponent like reset stamps, that can also like make your life a lot harder. You then need to try and use like Ninetales to get into your rare candy and whatnot. So even though toy box is an amazing tool right now, it's not like the be all and end all. It doesn't like instantly win you the game. So do bear those things in mind. Let me know what you think about this Whimsicott list, as well as the Welder build that I tried out earlier. It's coming towards that time where I can start getting some battles going. I'm actually moving house today. I'm moving in with one of my close Pokemon friends, and hopefully that means I can get some tabletop matches going for the Worlds format. So that should be some good variety of content coming soon. So I will still keep up with these sort of deck lists until the set is actually released. So another week or so until it's out on PTCG. PTGO, actually more like 10 days or 12 days or something like that. But it means that it's not long now until we can have some PCGO games, and until then, we can have some tabletop matches. I'm really hoping that can work out because I haven't, I've not got to the house yet with all my equipment. I'm still at my current place, so I'm hoping that the move will go well and I can set up a camera for both of us to play. That's pretty much the goal. So yeah, let me know what you guys think, and let me know what games you want to start seeing on the tabletop matches. I'll hear it all down below. As always, thanks so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you in another video tomorrow. Cheers.